Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, President Trump's pro-Israel administration picks and executive orders coming out fast. How will they affect Israel's future? Analysis from Jonathan Tobin from the Jewish News Syndicate and Jeff Balaban from the American Center for Law and Justice. Plus, Israeli firefighters face California infernos while the red heifers grow up quietly in Shiloh. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. From defunding the UN Relief and Works Agency to speeding up arms sales, President Donald Trump has signed a host of executive orders strongly backing Israel. The president's foreign policy picks are also voicing their support for Israel's right to defend itself. Trump's executive orders affecting Israel include revoking sanctions imposed by the Biden administration on a number of Israeli citizens in Judea and Samaria, restoring sanctions on the International Criminal Court, defunding UNRWA, authorizing deportation of visa holders involved in pro-Hamas protests, and lifting restrictions on arms sales to Israel, including the supply of 2,000-pound bombs. In his first hours in office, Trump questioned whether the days-old ceasefire between Hamas and Israel will last.
Oh, he has very good reason to be skeptical. This ceasefire hostage deal is almost certain to, at some point, collapse.
Jonathan Tobin of JNS.org told CBN's Gary Lane that while Trump's picks for his foreign policy team are pro-Israel, the deal undermines Israel's goal of defeating Hamas.
But Donald Trump, on the one hand, his administration, says they're against Hamas. They want to help Israel get rid of Hamas. But it is contradictory because this deal more or less guarantees that Hamas will take back control of most of Gaza because Israel is being forced to withdraw. It's as simple as that.
The Senate has already confirmed Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, who said Hamas can't remain in power in Gaza.
View in the context of
On Tuesday, Elise Stefanik, Trump's pick for ambassador to the UN, testified at her confirmation hearing. Stefanik is well known for grilling university presidents who tolerated anti-Semitism on their campuses. She spoke out against funding for UNRWA.
We should never tolerate any U.S. taxpayer funds going towards terrorism. As in my question with the ranking member, Shaheen, I was one of the members that voted to defund UNRWA. I was one of the leaders in standing for that important appropriations vote, which there is a bipartisan consensus.
Stefanik also sees Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, through a biblical lens.
This is the Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich and the former National Security Minister Ben-Gvir, who believe that Israel has a biblical right to the entire West Bank. And in that conversation, you told me that, yes, you shared that view. Is that your view today?
Yes.
With a ceasefire underway in Gaza, IDF Chief of Staff Halevi announced his resignation, citing his responsibility for the military's failure on October 7th. The head of the IDF Southern Command also stepped down, and it's expected more IDF leadership will leave their posts in the near future. Meanwhile, violence continues against Israeli citizens. Tuesday in Tel Aviv, a U.S. green card holder in the country for just 3 days stabbed 4 Israelis. Many Israelis are concerned the hundreds of Palestinian prisoners to be released in the hostage deal will lead to a dramatic increase in terror attacks. Here's more of the interview with Jonathan Tobin, who spoke with Gary Lane on his CBN News program, The Global Lane. As editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, Tobin has a unique perspective on the ceasefire deal and the decisions coming out of Washington.
Monday in the Oval Office, the president was asked about the ceasefire. He projected a hands-off attitude, saying it's not America's war. So just how involved do you expect his administration and Secretary of State Marco Rubio to be in ending the war and ensuring Israel is supported by the United States? What difference do you expect over the Biden administration?
Well, I am hopeful, and I think there's every reason to be hopeful, that Trump and Secretary of State Rubio will not be looking to second guess, to hamstring, and to stop Israel from doing what it needs to do to defend itself. That's what Biden did. I mean, he always talked out of both sides of his mouth about the war on Hamas, as did the rest of his foreign policy team. I don't think we're going to get that from Trump. Clearly the opposite. But what that means is that, he also wants there to be no foreign wars. He wants this war to end. But the only way it ends is with an Israeli victory, with Israel finishing the job of taking out Hamas. And the terms of this, hostage release deal more or less ensures that that can't happen, because the ceasefire allows Hamas to rearm, reorganize, and take back control of those areas that it was kicked out of, in exchange, hopefully, for all of the hostages. But even in the first deal, we didn't even get the Americans out. So there's good reason for optimism about Trump's attitude and his willingness to let Israel do what it needs to do. But with this deal, Israel's been made weaker, and it will resume the war at some point, almost certainly, because Hamas is bound to violate and not make good on the second and third phases of the deal. And the price for this deal will be paid not only in the release of hundreds of murderers and convicted terrorists, which is shocking and terrible, but also in the lives of Israeli soldiers and Palestinians who will be killed when the war inevitably resumes, because that's the only way that Hamas will be destroyed. Allowing it to stand means Hamas survives and wins, and that dooms the Middle East to repeat the cycle in which Hamas vows to create more October 7th atrocities, and Israel must defend itself.
And what about its sponsor, Iran? I mean, Russian President Putin recently entered an agreement to provide Iran with advanced weaponry, new air defense systems. So is now the time for Israel to make a move against the Islamic Republic's nuclear assets before those new systems are delivered?
Well, Iran is the head of the snake. Iran, which was strengthened by Joe Biden's appeasement and his sending of money and relaxation of sanctions, they created this seven-front war on Israel that began on October 7th, 2023. Israel needs to address that. The United States needs to address that. And again, will be a test for President Trump and his foreign policy team. They don't want to get into a war with Iran. Americans rightly don't want more foreign misadventures. But Israel may have to do something about that. And the hope is, and I think it's a reasonable hope, is that the United States will support Israel in that, give it the green light, back it up, give it the weapons it needs if it doesn't have them now. Let's hope that's the way we're heading, and not towards an effort to sort of allow this ceasefire to stand, forever, so as to enable Hamas to continue to survive and win. And that's a win for Iran. That shouldn't happen.
Okay, we'll see what happens with the new administration. Jonathan Tobin, JNS Editor-in-Chief. Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing your insights. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Coming up, winds of change in Washington. What do they mean for Israel? Many in Israel celebrated this week over President Trump's inauguration. For them, the administration change signals greater security and hope for Israel. We caught up with Mike Evans, founder of the Friends of Zion Museum, at an inauguration gathering.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
What do you expect to see in a Trump presidency?
We saw 4 years of miracles, and we're going to see more. We're going to see peace with Saudi Arabia this year. He's going to stand with Israel against their terror enemies very strongly. The nation of Israel is going to have a solid fist against any of the enemies, and the nations that want to fund Hamas will have the wrath of Donald Trump and sanctions put on them. It's going to be a different day for the state of Israel, Chris. It's painful today because of what they're going through, but it's going to be 4 great years. God has answered our prayers.
You were part of an evangelical group that supported him during his first administration. Do you see that kind of support this administration as well? 100%.
You think about it. I just talked with Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee supports sovereignty, Judea and Samaria. Donald Trump chosen. Marco Rubio came to the gala I hosted. Secretary of State. This is even a stronger team than last time. 100%. The Secretary of Defense, Pete, has been here. Strong believer. 100%. Israel is going to do fantastic. By the end of the Trump, we're going to see a new Israel.
And what are Israelis looking for right now?
Well, what they're experiencing, Chris, for the first time in over 470 days is hope. You can see it on their faces. They believe the hostages were freed because of Donald Trump. And they see hope with Donald Trump and his presidency. They know what he did for them for 4 years, and they believe he's going to do more. So there's hope tonight. There's hope.
Jeff Balaban, you were there the other night at the Friends of Zion Museum, the event. What was that like?
It was terrific. First of all, it was great to see all my friends at CBN there. Second of all, I dare say the energy, excitement, the goodwill, the feeling there was possibly greater than anything anywhere, even in America, maybe even in Washington, D.C. It was just such it was walking up to the building, to the Friends of Zion Museum in the heart of Jerusalem, and hearing the strains of Proud to be an American, walking in and seeing people dance to the YMCA song. The whole thing was wonderful, but mostly, you know, it was a tough day, right? It was the hostage day where there was a lot of pain and a lot of joy, so it was a very emotional day, and this added to it a sense of possibility and hope, and a new day is dawning.
Yeah, talk about the contrast between 4 years of the Biden administration and what impact they had here in Israel, and now the incoming Trump administration.
Sure. Listen, those 4 years were very, very difficult, very, very painful. I think they were painful on many levels. In America, domestically, for people of faith, it was challenging on many levels. And for Israel, obviously, it was challenging in many ways. And then it went from challenging to disastrous, catastrophic, following the October 7th attacks. And, you know, America used to be united behind Israel. Now it's become divided. And unfortunately, that division really showed in the way the Biden administration treated Israel versus its enemies. And it was painful. And this is, you know, a new day has dawned, and there's tremendous potential and possibility now, but also some peril. And we should talk about that.
Yeah. Well, what are what's some of the potential and what's some of the peril in your view?
Well, it's clear that Donald Trump was far and away the most pro-Israel president, but when people say that, you know, it's not just because he's a supporter, it's because he is different from any politician we've ever had. He's not really a politician. He's a deal maker and he's a patriot. But one thing also, he believes in keeping his promises. Promises made, promises kept. And we haven't seen that from other politicians or presidents. But because he's a deal maker, you know, he leaves his people up to making those deals. He's like, I made a promise, I'm going to deliver that promise to the American people, and it's very important to him. But the details, other people work out. And so the great promise for Israel and for America is that Trump will keep his promises, and those promises are, thank God, very, very positive. And he has a clear mandate from a huge number of Americans, you know, including the popular vote.
Yeah.
However, the peril is that, for example, I know Israel, just going back to this issue, Israel frequently pulls its punches concerned about what the world thinks, what the UN's going to say, what Europe's going to say, what the Democrats are going to say. You know, this has become an existential matter right now, and Israel has to be very clear, because Donald Trump, even though he's great people around him who are super pro-Israel around him and who get this, they're not going to be able to be more aggressive than Israel in carving out a deal. And so, for example, when we're talking about the Saudis coming in, which would be huge, with the Abraham Accords, again, another thing completely because Trump is who he is, and it's fantastic. Well, the Saudis are very clever, and they're going to make certain demands. Israel has to be strong and aggressive and take as much as it can now, because that deal is going to set the tone for the future.
Talk about a couple of other areas. Mike Evans mentioned it, the possibility of sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And one thing he did mention was Iran. What do you think may happen with Israel and the U.S. now on the same side, at least philosophically, about Iran?
Yeah, well, Iran, many believe, and I think the president believes, Iran tried to take out the president. I mean, there's a belief that Iran tried to assassinate President Trump. Certainly, Iran is an enemy of the United States. And the Biden administration, like the Obama-Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, they didn't understand that at all. On the contrary, they kept on trying to make nice to Iran. They funded up Iran. I mean, billions and billions of dollars, which Iran took and used to start blowing up Jews. Really, start funding up Hamas and Hezbollah and start killing us. So this war, I believe, and many believe, and Donald Trump believes, never would have happened had it not been for the way Joe Biden treated Iran. Well, he's not going to treat Iran the same way. Let's hope there's regime change. Let's hope that Israel leads the way. Israel already has, but that America is not shy about. I'm not talking about a shooting war. I think that it can be encouraged for it to topple. Israel's already demonstrated phenomenally, massively, even while it was under Biden, who put tremendous limitations on them. They demonstrated their ability to reach out to Iran and do major damage to that regime. So we can hope that. The other thing I'll add is, Iran has been in the weapons business for a long time, and Iran is in pursuit of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBM. They do not need ICBMs to reach Jerusalem, but ICBMs do reach Washington and Chicago. And so we do have to be worried about Iran, and I think that it's a new day for that as well.
Yeah. Final question. A lot of people believe that President Trump is now president because of prayer. You're a man of faith. Going forward, how would you encourage people to be praying?
Well, I would say that we continue to pray for his success and for wisdom, for all the world's leaders. We say, Jews say that the hearts of leaders are in the hands of God, and that everyone's hearts, but specifically leaders, when they're given this much influence and this much power over the affairs of men, so there's that much more guidance that God gives them. And so we pray for that guidance. And let's also pray for the wisdom of people, that the leaders of Israel understand that this is a tremendous moment for them, that the leaders across America, not just the president, understand that this is a moment. And also I would say, because you said many people believe that Donald Trump got in because of prayer. Well, then, if that's what you were praying for, keep on praying, because God, it's really working, thank God.
Yeah, great point. Jeff Balaban, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Up next, fighting California fires together. Israeli firefighters alongside the U.S. counterparts. A tangible sign of the U.S.-Israel friendship is on display in Southern California, with the help of a special team of Israeli firefighters. As the wildfires started tearing through the city, the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles spearheaded an effort to bring in their experts. CBN's Paul Petit has the story.
Some 14,000 firefighters have teamed up to help combat what could be the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. They include a team from Israel.
We drove in those neighborhoods. There's nothing there.
This team of 13 firefighters see their contribution as a way to give back.
You guys are always stood and stand next to Israel, behind Israel, and now it's the time for Israel to come and stand behind the United States.
Lashea Moore is Israel's operation officer. After touring the damage, she compared it to Gaza and hopes her team can share best practices to ensure a fire of this magnitude never happens again.
And I look at it and I said, oh my God, we must stop it. We must do everything to come, to support and to help you, because we cannot let it go like this. We must save our places, our home, our land.
This group is not just firefighters, they're fire experts. Dr. Shay Levy wrote a book on wildfires and researches embers.
Sometimes you're with the crews, the fire crews, and you can't see it because of the smoke, and you focus on the fire, and suddenly the fire starts in another area.
The relationship between California and Israel firefighters began in 2010, when then California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger sent a contingency of California firefighters to Israel to help battle the Carmel fires there.
and we're talking to them and learning how that they manage incidents over there, and we're embedding them, and it's a learning process. All of us can learn from each other as we have different dynamics and incidents in what we do.
It just so happens the fires broke out January 7th, exactly 15 months after Hamas attacked Israel. Somehow, both events are now serving to bring these two allies closer together.
Now, right now, this our time and this our turn to come and to support you at your tough times.
In Los Angeles, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Still ahead, well-tended red heifers in Shiloh, and the role one of them will play in the fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
In September 2022, the arrival of 5 red heifers in Israel caught the world's attention. Now, more than 2 years later, those cows are being cared for in ancient Shiloh, and they continue to attract international visitors. Here's the story.
Here in Shiloh, first time after 2,000 years, we have real kosher red heifers, which is really exciting.
Mariah Shapira is the manager of the visitor center at ancient Shiloh and explains why the red heifers are so important.
In the Bible, it says when a person wants to enter the temple, which is called the house of life, he has to go through a process using ashes of the red heifer, meaning that the red heifers are actually the key to the temple.
Shapira says that process is for purification, to cleanse someone from death.
So a person that got in contact with death, either in a funeral or in a hospital, and he wants to enter the temple, which is called the house of life, full of the presence of God, has to go through this process. And the process is the priest used to take the ashes of the red heifer, mix it with water that comes from a spring, life water. He's actually taking the source of death, mixing it with source of life, and these together become the purifying water.
Jewish tradition maintains that the red heifer ashes are needed to rebuild the third temple. Some Christians believe a third temple would pave the way for the end times. Even Hamas reportedly blamed the red heifers in part for their invasion on October 7th, because the Al-Aqsa Mosque would be in danger if the heifers were used to build a third temple. The animals are also mentioned in the book of Numbers, chapter 19. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "This is the statute of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, that they bring you an unblemished red heifer, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never been mounted. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it shall be brought outside the camp, and be slaughtered in his presence." To be selected, these qualifications must be met. Be an adult cow with reddish-brown hair, no hairs of a different color, no blemishes, and never used for any other purpose.
These are the 5 red heifers out here in Shiloh. 2 have already been disqualified, but you only need 1 to qualify for the ceremony for the purification for the temple. Here you go, ladies.
My next point is to try to find a farmer who can make hay, which is, the flowers and the leaves and everything stay on them. That way it's better for the cows.
Larry Barnschwager, a farmer from northern Indiana, takes care of them.
It's just a lot of fun to be involved in something that I see God is doing behind the scenes.
He says what he's experienced since arriving here is remarkable.
While I've been standing here at Shiloh, every continent, countries I'd never heard of before, were here to see the red heifers. There's something happening in Shiloh.
And Barnschwager believes it's biblically significant.
Ideas are becoming a reality. In other words, the idea of a red heifer has been in the Jewish understanding for over a couple thousand years. But here at Shiloh, just like it says in Genesis 49, there's something happening here that's drawing the nations, and it's the red heifers.
This area is where Hannah prayed for a son, where Samuel served the Lord, and Joshua divided the land between the 12 tribes.
The place where many stories of the Bible occurred. And today we also have here the red heifers, which is something new. The budgets for this visitor center stopped because of the war, So we invite whoever wants to be partnered with us to help this very important thing of the red heifers.
Shiloh has so much significance. It was the spiritual capital of Israel for 369 years.
During our visit, Bible teacher Dr. Todd Fink brought his group to see the red heifers.
This is huge. This is huge, and the one gal that was giving us the tour, she said that part of the reason why Hamas invaded is because of these red heifers. And according to prophecy, these red heifers are significant. From the time of Israel's history, they say that only 9 have been killed for these ashes. And so for these to be here in Shiloh here, and for that to fit in with what appears to be prophecy on the horizon, we're living in monumental days, unbelievable times.
Well, it's quite a fascinating story. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and the protection of all of Israel, and for the successful release of more hostages this weekend. And may the rest of them come home soon. I'm Chris Mitchell for all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.